Chad asks, would you ever be down to go on Joe Rogan's podcast? Fuck yeah, of course. 100%, especially because I do jujitsu. Like, I was an MMA bro before I was a Bernie bro. In truth in lending, back in the day, like OG days, I used to listen to Rogan. You know, I started tuning out around 2017, 2018 because A, I was moving left very quickly, but also B, he wasn't always so weirdly MAGA adjacent, and he wasn't obsessed with like trans athletes. That was like something that only started during the Trump years. And then he started like having guests on, comedians and shit, who were guilty of sexual assault, and like there was a lot of them. So I was like, you know what? This shit is not for me anymore. Like, I've outgrown this. The politics were getting gross. And Rogan does not challenge his interviewees, his guests, at all. It's just like, let's have a beer and do some steroids and smoke a blunt, you know? And so like, I would be confident that I could handle myself on Joe Rogan, but it's also not very likely. The only left person I've seen go on Joe Rogan who was not like an elected official, I mean, correct me in chat if I'm wrong, but the only one is Ben Burgess. And that's because Ben Burgess wrote a little pamphlet book that was titled Canceling Comedians While the World Burns. And so it happened to slot in perfectly. If you only read the title and not the book, you would come to the incorrect conclusion that this was a book about cancel culture per se and condemning cancel culture per se. And so as a comedian whose one of his pet issues as a right-wing comedian was cancel culture for being anti-woke or whatever, well, so you bring him on the show. And then it turns out you've brought onto the show a low-key Marxist, right, in Ben Burgess. So that was like, as far as I know, a one-off. But hopefully it happens more. The thing is, he's not ideological. He just has pet issues that people in his social network have fed him and that he's internalized. But he's like a walking, talking, living conjuncture in the Stuart Hall sense. You're just this point of convergence of all these different threads. And there is inevitably going to be a bunch of contradictions in that. And it just happens that they are very right-wing leaning tendencies, but there's still tons of like incoherence and contradiction in the Rogan stuff. And as long as that's true, I think it means that there's like a way to reach him and to reach parts of his audience, because he did have Bernie on at one point. You know, he was a Bernie bro. He does, if you press him, he does care about like human beings generally. He's getting older too, Rogan, and he's got so much money, it's unbelievable. He physically lives in Texas. You know, his network pushed him to have Trump on. He used to, people don't remember this, especially if you weren't actually listening to Rogan, but like back in like the 2016 2017 timeframe, Rogan hated Trump. He was very anti-Trump. What I saw from Rogan, yes, he was anti-trans. Yes, he had bad politics, just sort of on issue to issue. But in the big picture, what I saw from Rogan initially was that he hated Trump. That speaks well of him. And that he loved Bernie. And he kind of loved AOC. And that also speaks well of him. He had an instinct or a vibe about politics that seemed populist, you know, but the left wasn't or the Democratic Party, I should say Democratic Party. The Democratic Party wasn't offering anybody who was populist except for Bernie. And the right, I mean, I feel like right-wing populism shouldn't be called right-wing populism. It's just demagogic authoritarianism. But yeah, Rogan has gotten much worse and more right-wing during the Biden years and the Trump years. This is also inside baseball. Apologies if this is not your bag, if you're not concerned about this, but like the top no-gi jiu-jitsu guy in the world, Gordon Ryan, he's a phenomenal grappler. He's also insanely MAGA. He believes every conspiracy theory. His brain is rotted. He thinks Biden stole the election. He's just like the most right-wing figure you could ever imagine. And he fucking loves Trump. loves him, promotes conspiracy theories on his social media all the time. And he's been on Rogan's podcast, and I think multiple times. Like, Rogan knows him. They're friends, you know. So Rogan's getting a lot of pressure to be right wing,